You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again to wade into their crypto waters. Yes, it is time for the Crypto Rundown. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting network upon which so many of you are mainlining these days. Remember, for a lot of you who are coming into the Crypto Rundown, a lot of these terms we're going to talk about today might be a little new to you. Things like skew and volatility and all this other fun stuff. If that's new to you, then make sure you're checking out the educational content on our network like Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Two great places to start. Over a decade worth of one show, pretty close to it on the other. So you got a lot of content you can mainline on your own time, at your own leisure out there. So however it works for your schedule, it's available for you. And you can come to grips with some of these terms that may be a little bit confusing for you. Then, of course, you can get more value out of the show going forward. And, of course, if you want to get more value from the network, I mean, we're coming at you with a ton of content this week. If you want to hear it all the instant, it is recorded. If you want to ask questions to our hosts and our guests, and, of course, participate in our pro Q&A session tomorrow with the creator of BitVol and everything else, Spikes over there, as well as our Options Oddities show on every Friday, all the other stuff we do throughout the week. We're going to have double shows coming at you a lot this week. The place you have to go to get all of it, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Or for all you cool kids out there, you can go to /secret club. And let's see who's joining us on the old program today. I'm pleased to be joined once again by our old friend, Mr. Bill himself, a.k.a. Bill Ulivieri, the founder over there at Cenacle Capital Management, a.k.a. the place where they are bridging the gap between traditional investments and digital assets. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown program, sir.
Good afternoon. Great to be back, Mark.
How are things in the land of Cenacle, sir?
Oh, man. You know what? We are just watching this market go up and down, mostly down, right? And just watching this unrelenting beating of cryptocurrencies and asset classes, with the exception of energy. It's been really something to watch. Fixed income and technology just still getting smoked, although there are a few interesting developments on the horizon. So we're keeping an eye on things.
Well, before we get into the Bitcoin breakdown and all that fun, as I mentioned, you are bridging that world between traditional assets and digital assets. So you do have one foot firmly in both camps, including managing a lot of capital on the traditional world of your equity options and all the other fun stuff. So obviously, since the last time you joined us, which was back in about mid-March, we've seen a lot of turbulence and a lot of downside on the screens in those big markets. What's been catching your eye, and what are your thoughts on this protracted sell-off? Not today, but outside of today, protracted sell-off we've seen for the better part of the last few months in the major markets, sir.
Well, the thing I'm really most struck by, Mark, is the fact that in, maybe mid 2020, where growth stocks and all the technologies and the Teslas and everything, on a scale of 0 to 7, I would say that the growth fund part of the economy was on a 6.5. Like I keep track of value versus growth. So right during the COVID thing, we had growth explode and value got crushed, all the dividend paying stocks. Now we're really seeing the opposite situation where on a scale of 0 to 7, growth is scoring a 0. And I think I may have mentioned this another time, but I just find it really interesting. Once again, this paradox, this pendulum between growth and value, fixed income versus equity. I'm also shocked that the VIX indicator, for the most part, really had been trading kind of sideways since mid 2020. I mean, once the COVID pandemic passed, and I would say that looking at the VIX indicator, maybe that was May of 2020, we haven't gone anywhere in 2 years with volatility. We've been in a pretty narrow range between, say, 38 and 16 in the VIX. So, I just when you think you got it all figured out, you don't really have it figured out. And it's just curious what's going on. And, you see crypto just getting annihilated, the Catherine Wood mutual funds, the ARK ETFs getting crushed. So I think there's some really, really interesting developments out there in terms of opportunity on the growth side, which of course cryptocurrency is. For me, it's an asset class like technology, it's growth. And so I think there's some places we need to put a few chips down.
Interesting. Let's see what chips are falling in the land of crypto. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin Breakdown, the portion of the show where we break down everything going on in the world's leading digital asset. Of course, we're talking about the old Bitcoin, and coming into showtime, we are seeing a little bit of green on the screen. One thing we've seen quite a bit, actually it's off now, it was a little bit higher right before showtime, a little bit north of 30,000. It has dipped back ever so briefly below the 30,000 level. In fact, one of the things we have seen quite a bit over the course of the past few years is just the correlation between Bitcoin and equities just continues to grow. In particular, they spotlighted the correlation between Bitcoin and the NASDAQ futures. And as they ran this was back, I think, last week. It was closing in. It looks like it's hard to read the legend on this graph, but it looks like it's north of 0.7, probably close to 0.75 in terms of positive correlation. And if you've been paying attention to the markets of late, that's pretty much where we've been. We've had a lot of guests of late come on here and say, yeah, Bitcoin is really just a high beta tech allocation at this point. And it certainly is performing that way, beta of about 0.75 for these latest numbers out of the journal. That compares, of course, to coming into the onset of the pandemic. It was actually inversely correlated for a little bit. 2019, it was about a negative 0.3. Right before the start of the pandemic, it was kind of uncorrelated, right around unched. And then it started shooting up north pretty much ever since this whole pandemic kicked off in 2020. So yeah, once again, we are seeing the markets lead the way for crypto. And that was the case until a few minutes ago. We had Bitcoin north of 30,000, 30,082 to be precise. And last show it was 29,829. Of course, if we waited a little bit, it is actually 29,689 689 right now. So we're actually down about $1.40 on the week. But of course, coming into showtime, it was up slightly, 250. That shows you kind of the range we're in right now. We are hanging out around that 30K level. Mr. Bill, what are your thoughts on what I just pointed out, that kind of ever increasing correlation, in this case to the NASDAQ, but you could draw similar numbers to the S&P as well. And also, what are your thoughts on this just bloodbath we've seen since the last time you and I have chatted out here in Bitcoin, sir?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Mark, in terms of Bitcoin and its correlation to equities, because And again, we're this is a work in progress, right? So first, when I read the white paper in Bitcoin, it was Bitcoin is digital cash. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, cash. And then I bought into the Bitcoin is a new digital gold. But then I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, it doesn't really correlate much to gold because gold is, lower than it was 10 years ago, I think, or at least in the same place as it was 10 years ago. And Bitcoin, of course, is up like 500,000% since its inception. And then recently, I would say in the last 8 months, I've grown to believe that everything is risk on except the US dollar. US dollar is risk off. As an asset manager, I would go to bonds, right, as a flight to quality when equities were pulling back. And I did buy some short-term bonds, for our clients, but I also bought a little bit of high-grade, high-yield stuff. I bought some 3 to 7 year treasuries and, some of the midterm stuff, like symbol IEI and, LQD, the liquid, the high-yield ETF. And, they went down like 8-10%, right? And so fixed income didn't provide the type of flight to quality as I had hoped. And I did own some SHY, which was the very short term treasury. So if I'm looking at my NASDAQ QQQ position versus SHY or IEI, like I'm fine. But I think, going forward, I'm going to be embracing Bitcoin as risk on in the same bin as everything except the US dollar. Or like for an exchange traded fund would be UUP. And so what I think we're seeing here, Mark, is I agree that, we're trying to figure out what Bitcoin is correlated to. We're trying to figure out if it's risk on or risk off. Is it growth? Is it a currency? Like, what is it? And we're working it out. And so I'm, again, for the time being, I'll be appreciating and embracing Bitcoin as risk on, as well as bonds and equities. But it's. I just want to leave space for the fact that if Bitcoin was a Marvel character, it would be Mystique, because it can be it can pose as anything or imposter like anything, right? And so I guess it just kind of depends on the way it grows and matures. But for now, I think Bitcoin, yes, is risk on. But what we're seeing here, Mark, if you take a look at the dollar, we're off. It's starting to roll over, it seems to me, in the US dollar. And the 10-year treasuries were trading, 310, 315, maybe even 320 on the rally. Now we're back at 280 something, 285. So it looks like the 10-year is starting to pull back a little bit. And, Jerome Powell, yeah, he might be talking about raising interest rates, but I think the bond market did the dirty work for him in terms of what we've seen in the yield curve. So I'm kind of optimistic right about here, although, we need a little bit more data to see if a falling dollar will create a risk-on scenario, which means that Bitcoin and other equities should perform handsomely.
Bitcoin is Mystique. I did not expect you to go there, Bill. My mind is filled with all sorts of imagery now of a blue Bitcoin that could shape shift and is killing people and all sorts of craziness. It means Bitcoin's a bit of a bad guy then too, is what you're saying.
Totally. And it can just impersonate and make it look like whatever, at least until it grows up, right? I mean, we went from this infancy, this newborn of Bitcoin, when it was first published in 2009 and, people were introduced to it. It was a new baby growing up and, just growing very fast. Now it seems to be a teenager where it is, it's an emotional, it's sometimes illogical. It's down like, I'm not even sure what its year to date is, maybe down 25 or 35%. But the truth is, I had a client called me up a week ago, said, "Hey, thank you for getting me into Bitcoin because it's actually a safe haven for me compared to my pharmaceutical stocks and some of his tech stocks that he owns." And I've been able to find, I posted on Twitter, there was about 25 or 35 mutual funds that have declined more in 2022 than Bitcoin. And I'm like, that's interesting. We're seeing, mid-cap growth and some technology stocks performing way worse than Bitcoin. And who would have ever thought that? Bitcoin is a flight to quality. I mean, that's just almost an insane comment, but it's true. I mean, we're seeing this decoupling of all asset classes, and this is something that I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to.
You're right. There have been really no safe havens for the better part of this year. Your traditional ones, you mentioned bonds. They have been moving in lockstep with equities to the dark side. So no joy, no safe haven there. Metals, I think, can charitably be characterized as having underperformed dramatically. So metals, another area for a flight to quality safe haven, have been underperforming. Yeah. I said it before, listeners, if you want truly contractually guaranteed inverse correlation to hedge or diversify, options are kind of really the only game in town. That's why we talk about them here so much on the network. What do you think? We should put out a poll, Bill, for the network. If Bitcoin was a Marvel character, which one would it be? And we'll give them 4 choices. One of them would be Mystique. We'll have to see. I don't know what the other 3 would be. We'll have to come up with a cool poll. Wolverine? I don't know. Now I'm distracted. We're going to talk X-Men for the rest of the show here, Bill. But let's keep on rolling into some of the vol. By the way, all these analytics coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires for yourselves. And that vol a little bit lighter coming into showtime. It's another way that Bitcoin kind of does, as a shapeshifter, does kind of perform a bit like metals in that regard. Where it comes to volatility, we can see it have moments of extreme volatility. And we did see that in between our show last week and the show before. We saw on the 12th of May, the vol spiked up to 132. So that's a pretty aggressive spike. And we can see that in precious metals as well. The vol can get pretty frothy, but it retreats very quickly. It is aggressively mean reverting. And that's pretty much what we saw in Bitcoin again coming into this show. Or last week it was 79 again. So it had already retreated down from 132 back to 79. And as of this week, it is back down to 70 again. So performing from a vol perspective, at least, just like a precious metal. BitVol, which is our friend Simon Ho's Bitcoin VIX, his 30-day kind of rolling measure of Bitcoin volatility. By the way, if you have questions about all of that, Simon will be joining us on the Pro Q&A tomorrow, beaming in from across the pond. I just saw him down in Texas and the week before that in Chicago. So I haven't seen him in a couple of years. I saw him twice in the span of 1 week. That was crazy. So good to see Simon. I can report proof of life. He does indeed live, does indeed exist over there across the pond. He'll be beaming in to answer all your questions about index vol, crypto vol, a whole bunch more tomorrow. TheOptionsInsider.com/pro is the place to go to join up so you can ask questions along with everybody else. Let's get out to the BitVol. Again, that's his 30-day rolling VIX measure for Bitcoin. It was almost a 92 on our last show, 91.82. It has come in a wee bit as well, down to about an 84, almost 84 and a half as of this show. Skew-wise, kind of a similar retracement there. Remember last show we were talking about how low could it go? How low could the skew get? And you're going to see that skew get markedly negative when we have an aggressive sell-off. And we did have that the week leading into our last show. We got down to a negative 25 on May 12th. So that's about as low as I've seen it out there. And it was negative 13, so I had already mitigated somewhat by the time of our last show. This week, it has gotten back down to about a negative 10, negative 9.8 to be precise, which is pretty much exactly where it was 2 weeks ago. So if you just looked 2 weeks ago and look today, you'd think not a heck of a lot has happened in between in the world of Bitcoin from a vol and skew perspective. And yet, as we all know, a lot of living going on out there. Bill, I'm curious for you, what was going through your mind when you saw a couple of weeks ago, just the meltdowns going on in, the stablecoin realm and how it was just dragging Bitcoin down with it? It did seem like it was very much a sky is falling type of moment for crypto. Everyone was freaking out. We saw billions lost in Luna and everything else out there. We'll get to all the altcoin in a second, but I'm curious for you, as you saw all this dragging Bitcoin down with it, but what were your thoughts out there, sir?
Well, I think, Mark, sometimes, I'll understand something theoretically, or at least I think I understand it. And then it isn't until it actually happens that I really learned the lesson. And it's like the very first time I was short Gamma as an options trader was in the fall and summer of 1987. And I thought I knew what I was doing trading in the pit. And I've got these theoretical sheets. I'm trying to be a little independent, vol trader being a sheet reader. And it wasn't until the crash of 87 that I learned what it means to be short Gamma and short volatility. And so the conversation over the last couple of years, lightly in crypto Twitter, was about what happens if Tether or these stable coins begin to unwind, how it will affect the price of Bitcoin. And I guess I kind of understood it intellectually, but I feel like I really learned what it meant recently. And that's with this unwinding of Luna, the stable coins, how they post Bitcoin as collateral. And in order to try to maintain on an algorithmic level what the $1 stability of the token, that they have to sell Bitcoin and they have to sell assets and they have to create and mint their own native tokens in order to sell to maintain this 1.00 or this dollar per token stable price. And So I really feel that I've learned a lesson, and I didn't own any a Luna, right? And I don't own any stable coins, but I just think I really learned a lesson about what it means that when there's a flight to quality, these stable coins are really, you got to be careful. They're not quite as stable as we believed. And at the same time, let me also say that it reminded me of the 2008, 2009, 2010 time period when stable value money market funds, which stable value, right? There's the word stable again, stable value versus stable coin. You had hundreds of money market funds break the buck during the Great Recession. There was even one, I think the famous one was the Reserve Fund, where they kept a hold of all investor assets and then used those assets to defend themselves against litigation against the people who were invested in the Reserve Fund because they stopped redemptions. And then they actually, after Barney Frank, we convened in at the congressional hearings. I think that's when the legislation and the disclosures went into money market funds saying, hey, money market funds can no longer guarantee a 1.00 or $1 per share stable price in times of volatility because they hold treasuries or they hold short-term obligations. Who knows what these stable funds own? So, I think stable coins are again maturing, and they're not all that different than stable value. And I say that very paradoxically that that even things in our own legacy financial system suffer and strain under times of volatility, and we saw it here with stable coins. So a little reminiscing of the old days, and just I know that we're going to fix this. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to fix this stable coin issue.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot to get to on that stable coin front. We'll get there in a little bit in the altcoin universe. I see some of your questions in the chat as well. We'll get to those on your crypto questions in a few minutes there, listeners. First, let's go around here. Run down some more of these analytics. I mentioned the vol coming in, the skew out there, Simon's bit skew, reflecting something similar. It was 96.5 on our last show. It actually has ticked up a little bit, 99.6. Remember, when you're taking one number to kind of encapsulate all of skew, it has to encapsulate the calls and the puts. So there's two moving parts there as opposed to what we're looking at when we're just negative skew. We're mostly looking at just a lot of action to the downside. So take that 3-point increase, a bit of a grain of salt. Well, speaking of increases, let's see what we got going on from an OI perspective. We have seen a lot of paper changing hands over the last couple of weeks on the Bitcoin options front. And let's see if that's translating into some changes from an OI perspective. Let's look at the monthly expirations first, where you folks are lining up, and it's still mostly June, so the quarterlies are still winning the race. I don't know if May has enough time to usurp June before it goes the way of the dodo. I guess we'll find out. Coming into showtime, we had June number 1, 75,000 contracts open in June. This is, again, all on Deribit. It's up about 4,200 contracts from this time last week. May number 2, 58,000 contracts. That's up 8,000, so that's nothing to sneeze at, but, again, not enough to catapult it into the number 1 spot. And then, of course, we have September number 3, 32,000 contracts, up about 1,400 from this time last week. Let's go break down some of the top positions. What are the size open positions in Bitcoin options right now? Got 2 ties in our top 5 listeners. I should tell you what's going on out there. First, the number 5/4 spot. We have a tie between the 40,000 strike and the 30,000 strike. Both of them have 11,000 contracts open. 40,000 is a newcomer to the top 5. 30,000 strike. That actually lost about 1,000 contracts in OI. It had 12,000 open last week. Now it's down to 11,000 and tied for the bottom/number 4 spot of our top 5. Number 3, we have the 60,000 strike, also unchanged on the week at 13,000 contracts. So not a lot of change in our top positions, which is kind of interesting. Number 2, we have the 25,000 strike, and it's tied with number 1, the 20,000 strike. Both of those have 14,000 contracts open. The number 1 spot is literally unchanged on the week, and the 25,000 strike has gained 1,000 contracts. So kind of a weird week. We had some decent paper. Again, the busiest day was May 20th with 28,000 contracts. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's not as busy as it has been the past couple of weeks. Last week, it was 38,000 contracts and then 46,000 contracts. So not quite seeing those levels, but we are back to where we were at the beginning of the month, May 5th. Also, the busiest day then was 28,000 contracts. So we are busier in terms of volume. It's just not resulting in a lot of new OI positioning, which is interesting. Again, kind of looks like a lot of back and forth kind of churn trading instead, which is also interesting. Let's see if that's going on out there in CME land as well. Let's start with the big CME Bitcoin options. And the answer there is no. Friday was kind of a quiet day, only 34 contracts going up out there. That OI has continued to climb now. It's up to nearly 3,000, about 2,850. It's up another 100 or so from this time last week, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for this contract is actually a fair amount. Remember, those are 5x contracts. So even at Bitcoin around 30,000, half what it was not too long ago, that's still a pretty beefy contract. Same deal with the futures. These are also 5x contracts. So we're seeing the OI tick up a little bit. It's up to about 12,000. And we saw about 11,000 trading on Friday. Again, nothing crazy on the numbers front. We've seen much higher numbers for both of those on the big Bitcoin futures. Let's get to a product that's a little bit more relevant for a lot of you out there, the micro Bitcoin futures. And those were a little bit more active. We saw 17,500 trading on Friday, and we saw the OI ticking up about 2,400 contracts to about 23,000 contracts. Mr. Bill, I know you've been, when you're dabbling in Bitcoin, mostly in the Grayscale Trust. Is that still the case? B, have you had a chance to look at, or are you intrigued at all? I know you had some regulatory prohibitions to keep you out of it in the past, but have you had a chance to look at the futures, or perhaps even, dare I say it, the BITO product since the last time we chatted, sir?
Right. I have looked at it, Mark. I'll be honest with you. I've given it a fair study, some moderate due diligence. And it's something I believe I will consider going forward in our product line of cryptocurrency type of assets. Okay, having said that, I am a sucker for things that trade for a discount. I'm not going to lie to you. And so the closed-end fund or the unit trust fund structure of the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust still is attractive to me. I find that I found a couple of articles saying that there may be another opportunity for the fund to receive its ETF status in July. I think there's a lot of not political, that's not the right word. There's a lot of institutional desire to bring about an ETF in Grayscale. So Fidelity, which owns the digital asset custodian platform, Fidelity, that has the net benefits 401k platform with like 20 million people and 11 trillion of assets, mentioning that they want to be able to provide Bitcoin investment to employee 401k plans on basically the net benefit side. Interesting that when you logged into a Fidelity screen, they actually asked you to send a comment to the SEC in this time period about the desire, your interest in having a Bitcoin spot ETF. So I'm still hopeful that discount to net asset value will close in the next few months. I'm not sure. But again, my heart is still with the people that brought this product to the market. And yes, sometimes I am guilty for trading an idea and not always just pure price. But I want to see how this plays out, because sometimes babysitting for me is just the best thing to do. So I am looking at BITO. I haven't added it yet to client accounts. I still am a Grayscale fan, and for better, for worse, for richer or poorer, I want to just hang on my hat to that hook for a little bit longer.
I will say we did some analysis of it not too long ago on our Advisors Option show of all places, and yeah, I was surprised at how well BITO has hung in. You know, when we first launched, all the hand-wringing was about all the drag, right? And oh my God, it's going to lose anywhere from 13 to 20+% a year. It's going to completely underperform. And when we crunched the numbers, I think this was when we did it, it was end of March, beginning of April, and it had only underperformed Bitcoin by about 2%, and it had been live for about 5 or 6 months. So from that perspective, it was kind of surprising to me at how well it had hung in. And of course, it has a listed liquid options market on it. So that kind of intrigues me. I do have to say it is a little bit more intriguing than when it first launched, Bill. So that's obviously the downside for Grayscale. No options yet, right?
Exactly. But again, my clients are not huge. Listen, I've got this book of business that's age 55 and above, and they're mostly women, and they trust me with their retirement plans and with their investment accounts. And there's only so far I can push the cryptocurrency, even option space, right? Because remember, there was a time where options received the bad public, a lot of bad press releases when they were considered, derivatives of mass destruction. And, the for my clients who are a little bit more old school, they would just prefer to see buy, sell. Like that's it. Buy to open, sell the open, buy to close. Like some of them just don't like all the activity. So I try to just pull back a little bit with that, Mark. But yes, you're right. I'm still an option trader by heart. It's in my blood. It runs through my veins. I trade it for my own account. I trade options for some of my other, more aggressive clients, cash secured put options. And when we get a little bit more activity in the world of cryptocurrencies and options, Bitcoin or Ethereum and the dozens, if not hundreds more, this is going to make for amazing, amazing opportunities to trade and potential profitability.
All right, a lot of amazing opportunities to trade and potential profitability in the altcoin universe. So let's get to it.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we break down everything going on outside of the big dog, which is Bitcoin, except for right now when we break down the top 10 from a market cap perspective. And oh, how the mighty have fallen. They're still a little bit higher this week than they were last week, ever so slightly. But yeah, it only cost you about $11.5 billion to break into the top 10 right now. That gets you to Dogecoin. That was not even on the radar not too long ago. But of course, we have seen some of the mighties like your Lunas and others fall by the wayside. And that has opened up some room for number 10, the Dogecoin, to slip right back in there. Almost $11.5 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Solana, just a little bit shy of 18 billion, 17.9 billion. Number 8, Binance USD, that is 18.4 billion. Number 7, Cardano, 18.5 billion. So again, they're kind of neck and neck there as well. Number 6, XRP. Will it ever get out of its own way? Will we finally have some clarification one way or the other? Who knows? 20.25 billion out there for XRP. Number 5, USD coin, 53.25 billion. Number 4, BNB, 54.5 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, hanging out about 73.25 billion right now. Then number 2, ETH, a little bit shy of $250 billion, 247 billion to be precise. And the big dog, Bitcoin, a lot smaller than it has been, 573 billion worth of market cap. Let's get out there to ETH, and kind of similar to Bitcoin. It's kind of been a bit of a shoulder shrug net week, show on show here. Last show, we were 2,033. This week, 2,046, up a whopping 13 handles over the course of the past week. Of course, obviously, we had a wider range than that. We got as high as almost 2,100. That was on Tuesday, right after our show last week. And then the low came on the following Wednesday, 1906. So didn't quite break the 1900 handle, but still intriguing stuff. Bill, we saw, obviously, Bitcoin get dragged down by all this madness in the altcoin universe over the last couple of weeks. But obviously, ETH dragged down as well below the 2,000 level. What are your thoughts, and have you been paying as much attention to ETH these days, sir?
I have, Mark, and I think, in addition to the cryptocurrencies getting, correlated with equities, that whole conversation that we had before, on top of that, we have the regulatory uncertainty, and that is, will the SEC declare and demand that every cryptocurrency project outside of Bitcoin be considered a security because of the Howey Act? Is it a security? And I would say for the most part, since 2010, as the cryptocurrency world began to get started, it was believed that all these things were outside the purview of the SEC. And now we're getting more and more information that perhaps this might be something that the SEC wants to regulate, right? And we have this huge diametric belief that if you're a decentralized autonomous organization with just a few coders creating their First Amendment right to code, that is something that's outside the laws of security. And then you have on the other side, you have Gary Gensler, who's trying to do the right thing and regulate this space. So, it's this tug of war between what's going to get regulated and what isn't. And Ethereum now falls under that because there was a central founder, being Vitalik Buterin, and the quote unquote initial coin offering, I think in the beginning of Ethereum, and then the clawback created Ethereum Classic. And so there's some just really interesting conversations. And I think there's a lot of fear that has taken some of the steam out of Ethereum and out of other cryptocurrencies. Christine Lagarde, I believe, said that cryptocurrencies are nothing. They're worth nothing. They mean nothing. And at the same time, we have a lot of evidence to the contrary. So again, a lot of fog out there, some unclarity, especially from the regulated side. And I like, how can I say this? Like, I respect Gary Gensler for what he's trying to do to protect the investor class. But all you have to do is go to the SEC website or the FINRA website and see that there are traditional companies like, insurance companies and broker dealers are getting fined billions of dollars for acting improperly on their side. So it's not like crypto is the only mistake. I don't want to say dirty player. That's not the right term, but there's still traditional financial, organizations that are being fined for misdeeds. And we don't have to just look at crypto for that. So I don't know. I mean, again, cryptocurrencies becoming of age, it's growing up. Of course, we're going to be considered securities, and some of it is true and some of it is not. On the good side, it's taking Ripple like 4 years to solve this equation, right? They have, I don't think they've settled yet, if I'm not mistaken. So yes, maybe cryptocurrencies will be regulated. Yes, it's probably going to take a decade to get to more than just a handful of them. So I'm not that concerned.
You're right about ETH, though. It was kind of interesting to watch when all this madness was unfolding. There did seem like a lot of people were starting to, I won't say sour on ETH, but there were some big accounts out there that were talking about how they were dumping all of their ETH when it hit 2,500 and things. And one of the few trends that was kind of reliable ever since we launched this show way back in the dark days of the crypto winter was most people seem to be pretty bullish on ETH. That seemed to be the one throughput for the entirety of this show. People maybe had pros and cons about Bitcoin, but most people were seemingly pretty bullish on ETH. Obviously, we've had some competitors pop in, like Solana and others, and they maybe were starting to steal some of their thunder as well. So all of a sudden, yeah, the ETH to the moon, here comes the flippening. It seems like some of that crowd maybe has walked it back a bit. Have you noticed that as well, Bill?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And listen, I'm not a legal expert, but I still maintain that Ethereum at its core is an operating system. It's a global operating system so that every piece of software can operate exactly the same, execute as designed globally, right? We're moving to this global world. It's not an Android. It's not an iPhone. It's not Linux. It's not Windows, 11. It's not DOS 3.0 and the hundreds of other operating systems that run. So again, I'm not a regulator, but I see the distributed nature and the computing design of Ethereum, regardless of its beginning. And so I think Ethereum will survive that one because it's sufficiently distributed, but the regulators are going to do what they do best, and that's regulate. And we'll see what happens, how that unfolds. But yeah, there seems to be a souring of all things crypto in this particular crypto winter.
Oh, you said it, not me. Crypto winter 2.0. I've been trying to avoid the term, Bill, but yes, perhaps this summer is the new crypto winter. I can't even say it. Crypto winter 2.0. ETH, like I mentioned, vol-wise, has been performing pretty much in a similar trajectory to what's going on in Bitcoin, as in down. Last show, it was on an 89. It had spiked to 156 on May 12th. So May 12th was the apex for vol for both Bitcoin and ETH. It got really high in ETH, which is what you expect. ETH usually has a bit of a vol premium to Bitcoin. Coming into today's show, it's down 11 points to 78. So again, seeing some of that aggressive reversion. So far, we've yet to really see moments where Bitcoin or ETH can really sustain a lot of these elevated vol levels for a long period. They spike up there, they get up there, they hang out there for a bit, then they almost immediately start retreating. That has become even more apparent as the correlation to equities increases in the last couple of years in particular. So yeah, intriguing stuff out there. Skew wise, again, same story as what we're seeing out there in Bitcoin. Last show was markedly negative, -17, and it hit a low of -38 on May 12th. Man, that's pretty bearish. And right now about a -9. So still negative by all means, but nowhere near what it was a couple of weeks ago out there. Let's look at the OI, see if things are moving on up out there. And on the call front, they are 1.65 million calls open on Deribit right now. It's up 180,000 from this time last week. So a lot of new players on the call front. The puts, shrugging their shoulders, only up 3,000 to 812 from this time last week. So it seemed like if we were going to hang out around that -38 level for a while, we're going to see a lot more puts come roaring in, and we're going to see maybe dare I say it, ETH get to 1-to-1 calls versus puts, but not quite there yet. Calls once again running away with it out there. Volume-wise, it was a pretty interesting time. The most active day, a little bit north of 250,000 contracts, 256,000. That was on the 20th. Again, that's a far cry from our last show where the volume peak was 461,000, but it's pretty much in line with the week before. So we're kind of back to where we were the end of April, beginning of May from a volume perspective. Going out to expiration, where you folks are lining up, where the size positions. Usually it's all about quarterlies in ETH, and that's pretty much the case again this week. June is still number one with 679,000 contracts open. It's up 27,000 contracts. May, though, doing its darndest to try to catch up. 552,000 contracts open in May. It's up 94,000. So I said, of the calls, it was about 165,000 new calls, 180,000 actually new calls opening. And it's like a good chunk of that was in May, 94,000 contracts opening up since our last show. September bringing up the rear, 378,000 contracts open there. That's up about 16,000 from this time last week. Let's go out to our top 5 positions out there in ETH options right now. A little bit more action in ETH than there was in Bitcoin. Number 5 is the 20,000 strike. So again, we are floating around the 2,000 strike, and it's still the 20,000 strike, number 5 out there. 99,000 contracts open. That is unchanged from last week. Number 4 is the 6,000 strike. So getting a little bit more relevant. That's 122,000 contracts open there. That's up 28,000. So a lot of new positioning on the 6,000 strike since our last show. Number 3, the 10K strike. So getting back out there again. 143,000 contracts open on the 10,000 level in ETH. That's up 1,000 from this time last week. Number 2, splitting the difference down to 5,000. The 5,000 strike for number 2. 162,000 contracts open there. That's up 20,000 as well. So maybe some vertical action between the 5,000 and 6,000 strike. And number 1 with the bullet remains the 4,000 strike. 174,000 contracts open. That's up 42,000 contracts from this time last week. So a ton of new positioning on the 4,000 strike. You don't see the 2,000. You don't even see the 3,000 here. The closest we have is 4,000. So that is interesting what's afoot out there from an options perspective. Mr. Bill, does any of this surprise you out here that we're seeing, I said we're hanging out, we're breaking 2,000 seemingly on a daily basis, and yet you can't find it anywhere in the top ETH positions, sir. Closest we get is 4,000.
Gosh, Mark, I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. It's probably just this wait and see attitude. I'm not really sure what to say. That it's risk on or risk off, right? So if we see dwindling numbers, it makes sense. If we see numbers starting to expand, it kind of makes sense as well. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure where to go with that one. I really don't.
I know where to go. Right into what's going on out there on the CME front, the ETH futures, the big ETH futures on CME listeners. Again, kind of treading water, not doing a ton of paper, but not doing nothing either. The 5,500 contracts trading on Friday, that's actually pretty decent for that contract. Again, this is a high multiplier contract. The OI is pretty much around the same. It's down a couple of hundred to 3,400 from this time last week. The micro contracts are where more of the action is, and we saw a little bit more paper going up out there. Not quite as active as we have seen, though. We saw about 26,000 trading last Friday. But on the OI, we're seeing a ton of OI on these contracts. It's up 16,000 to 90,000 contracts open right now. I do believe that's a new record for these contracts. Remember, they just launched in December, so they're fairly new. So 90,000 contracts open on the micro ETH futures. So you folks are clearly playing in those, even if you aren't playing in the big ETH contracts over there at CME. Before I get into the rundown for the rest of the altcoin universe, Mr. Bill, you mentioned Ripple and some of the others. One of the things I like whenever you come on, sir, is you always got a few interesting altcoin burning a hole in your back pocket. What is on your radar? What are you keeping an eye on in the altcoin universe these days, sir?
Well, Mark, right now I'm going to go back to basics, and that is I look at my distribution of all my Coinbase tokens. I keep track of about 100 plus tokens on Coinbase, and without exception, all of them are between, say, 80 and 100% oversold, and it looks horrible out there. But I have to ask myself, what does it mean to go back to basics? How do I begin again in this space? And it just makes me think that for me, back to basics means which tokens are going to play a big role in decentralized finance or in the financial world. And those are the ones like the SWIFT payment system, which are ISO 222 compliant, 20022. So the SWIFT payment messaging system switched and went on this new adoptional standard organization, like ISO 9000, like for engineers, like this. And so their standards are going to be important for usability and interoperability on central bank digital currencies once it's rolled out. So don't tell me that we're not going to have central bank digital currencies globally, because they already switched to a standard in order to promote that. But then which cryptocurrencies are going to be a part of that or are already compliant in that world? Well, one of them is Ripple. They are ISO 222 compliant. Another token called the XFIN Network, XDC. XDC is the symbol. They were the ones that actually were part of the R6 consortium, if I'm not mistaken, R3 consortium that contains over 200 financial institutions. This was something that happened back right in the beginning of blockchain, right in the beginning of cryptocurrency, was this organizations, this non-for-profit organization, the R3 consortium, which considered banks and central banks, financial trading firms like Goldman and insurance companies, in order to be able to come up with a standard that they could work on together. Algorand and Stellar Lumens are all, if not ISO compliant, are and will be shortly. So I don't know. I think I'm going to look that way. That's where I'm going to focus my next, say, 2 or 3 months until we come out of this crypto winter and things make sense. Because it just seems to me that I can have my own opinion on growth versus value. I can have my own opinion on Dogecoin versus Shibu or whatever, right? But ultimately, if there is a use case, it's going to be amongst financial services, wire transfers, PayPal, Visa, MasterCard, the Strike app, El Salvador. These other 24 countries just met in El Salvador to discuss financial inclusion. And they went to El Salvador because of their acceptance of Bitcoin as legal tender. So we have 44 other countries looking to stick it to the IMF. I guess that might be one way of saying it, right? They want to maybe create their own international standard and way of communicating and transferring value with each other rather than using the US dollar or the SWIFT payment. So, the future is here, but it's still kind of murky. And I think for the time being, I'm just going to look at some of those tokens that begin with the letter X.
Just X. I know I know a while back you were big on Avalanche. Is that one still on your radar, or are you kind of dialing back on that one as well?
Oh boy, Mark, they all look good, right? To me, I mean, again, I look at where these things are risk on and risk off, if they're overbought or oversold. And yeah, I like them. I like them all. There's really a token project that I don't like. And that's part of the problem. So I'm kind of guilty by just association of the idea. And again, it's there's only so many dollars, in our household. There's only so many dollars my wife will let me throw at this stuff because she'd rather do gardening and, get a tune-up on the car. But so because there's limited dollars and there's way more cryptos than I can look at or can afford to buy, like 8-track tapes or record albums, I've got to be a little bit more prudent in my purchases. So I think the next block of time and money will go toward the X Factor type of tokens as I had mentioned.
The X Factor. Back to the X-Men again. See, yes. It all goes back to the X-Men. See, you have the throughput, the thread running throughout the entire show here. Yeah. Bill. All right, let's go out. Speaking of X, let's go out to XRP. Our friend Ripple run down a few of these altcoins, and we'll get into some of your questions here. XRP looking a little bit lighter, off about 0.2 cents. Really, actually, it's kind of unched on the week, so not a huge change there. In terms of good old Doge, again, same deal, kind of unched on the week as well. Litecoin, actually, a rare bit of a rally. It was 67.71 on our last show, 72.36 when we kicked off the show today. Up nearly $5, 465. Cardano also, let's see, taking a bit of a break out there. Unfortunately, it's been kind of rough times for a lot of these names out there. Last show, nearly 57 cents. Coming into today's show, 54.6, down about 2.2 cents. Polkadot, it was 10.75 on our last show, about $10.50 today, so off about a quarter. Whole lot of treading water over the course of this past week. Solana giving it up a little bit, 55.25 last show, 52.91. This show, so off about 234 on the week. And everyone's favorite, Shiba, unfortunately for our listeners who are into the Shiba Lambo Club, no Lambos this week for you Shiba fans. It is time to answer your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
Before we get to the questions, Bill, you inspired us to put out a quick flash poll on if Bitcoin was a Marvel character, which one would it be? We gave him 4 choices. Wolverine, Magneto, just for fun, your favorite Mystique, or to throw in an out of left field character, we threw in Rocket Raccoon. This is a quick flash poll. It's going to be done in a few minutes, just the length of the show. And right now, Bill, Rocket Raccoon is running away with it 100% of the votes, sir.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
I don't know what that means, but read into it what you will.
We're doomed.
Yeah, maybe you should divest. If it's going to be Rocket Raccoon, then we are set for some crazy times ahead out there. So there you go. If you're listening live, get out there. Express your, maybe you have a different Marvel character you prefer. Write in and let us know. That's just like our listener did. We got P&L Man listening live. He says, Bill, it seems to me that investors fall into 2 camps when it comes to crypto. Those that like it for its DeFi attributes and those that don't like it because it's not regulated. Since these 2 ideas are mutually exclusive, how do you see the debate getting resolved? Bill, this is obviously the $1 million question in the crypto space. You are the man, as I said at the top of the show, you are the man who is bridging the world. You are standing astride it like a colossus, sir. 1 foot in the digital side, 1 foot in the traditional camp. How do we bring these 2 camps together, the DeFi folks and the centralized folks, sir?
Wow, that's an amazing question. I'm not going to lie to you. That P&L Man, that was a good one. Well, I guess the way I would answer it is, regulation and the government moves very, very slow compared to technology and nascent technology, right? So we're always going to have technology and entrepreneurs and coders way ahead of the SEC and other regulatory bodies. So there will always be this, catch-up game like this. What was that game that we had when we were kids? It was it looked like a dock sound, except it had a long spring between the front and the back, where it would it took time for the rear caboose to kind of catch up.
A slinky dog thing.
The slinky dog thing. Yeah, right. That's what we're kind of signed up for. So on one hand, we're going to have people who don't take this the wrong way, but they don't care about regulation. They don't care about rules. They're here to create stuff to change the world, and they'll move to Costa Rica or El Salvador or another country and bring life-changing, world-changing technology over there. And so the word regulation kind of means something different because it's a geographic design as well. So you may find that there's less regulation in Latin America, less regulation in the Central American Republic, less regulation where those people who are suffering and trying to just live hand to hand or hand to mouth, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in Africa and Latin America. So I'm going to say that the United States and European Union is privileged to have a strong regulatory environment, but at the same time, it stifles innovation. So I think this is not like Ford versus Chevy or Bitcoin versus Ethereum or Cubs versus Sox, and it will never be resolved. End of story. This will always be an ongoing conversation, and the people that are creators in doing stuff are going to love cryptocurrency and blockchain technology for its decentralized, distributed properties. And then there's going to be other people that are going to say, hey, let's just create, like PayPal and other financial companies are going to use blockchain technology, and you won't even know that they're using it on the back end, right? It's like a voice over internet protocol, or maybe even a regular broadcast that you listen to on AM and FM, but it goes through the internet and is broadcast on some other remote location. So we're never going to solve this question. This is just part of what we signed up for, and it's okay. It's all good. Green Bay Packers versus the Bears. We can love each other, we can oppose each other, and we can have a good time while we're going on this journey. That's what I think it's going to be. It's not either or, it's both and.
I think we can all agree the Packers suck, though, right? That's kind of just a given here, I thought.
There's no hate in this home, Mark.
You're closer to the Wisconsin line than I am, so maybe your loyalties are stretched a little bit, but yes. All right, let's get out of here on this silly one. This comes from another one of our members, Option God. He says, hey, Crypto Rundown, can you guys discuss PAC on your next show? Your thoughts, etc. Thanks. I've seen them chatting about this in our live chat a bunch. I haven't had a chance to dig into it myself, so our producers were kind enough to forward this from the PortugalNews.com, which is a hotbed of all the crypto information. It's about this Pac-Man frog, ticker PAC, is looking to make a lasting impression in the NFT and GameFi world. So it's a new NFT. It's on the Solana network. It was created to help its holders pursue, quote, enthralling projects in NFTs and GameFi. Uses the DAO model, so there's no single person running the show there. Users will become eligible to participate in that when they have 1 million PAC tokens or more. And they say people are excited by this NFT aggregator and NFT launchpad. So there you go. Mr. Bill, I know you love yourself a little bit of an esoteric altcoin. Are you as excited as our listener Option God is about the Pac-Man frog?
Well, as someone who has a baby Pac-Man game in his basement, I find it intriguing. But let me just say that in my world, I subscribe to this great crypto research tool. It's Masari. And if I can't find a token or a project on the Masari platform, then I don't really give it any thought. And so there's only so much bandwidth I have. And I think non-fungible tokens are a thing. I believe it to be, we're seeing, Nike and Gucci and other companies coming on board, creating NFTs and in the metaverse. Super exciting. My son, who is 22, spends more money on a virtual knife or a virtual club or a virtual mace than he would for a real one he could get on eBay. So there's that. I have absolutely 100% certainty that non-fungible tokens are going to be a thing. I'm just not so sure that I understand enough about Pac Frog to really make a statement. I'm still kind of licking my wounds from Shiba and Doge. So let's just say that, twice burned, I'm shy. Okay. Twice burned, once shy. So I'm going to hold off on making a comment on that. It's just, probably just not my thing. Doesn't mean it's not a thing.
All right, there you go, Option God. Yeah, kind of a silly one. Obviously, we haven't spent a lot of time looking into Pac-Man Frog, a.k.a. PAC, but who knows? Maybe it'll make it on our radar. I know you guys have been talking about it in the chat, so maybe we'll do a little bit deeper dive than just the Portugal news here and see what's going on with Pac-Man Frog. But before we go, Mr. Bill, if folks want to find out what's going on over there in the land of Cenacle Capital, where should they go? What should they do?
Well, follow us on Spotify, the Blockchain Advisor. We can also, text the number 22828. I'm sorry, text the word blockchain to 22828. That's the word blockchain to 22828 and subscribe for our newsletter. I put out a newsletter about once a month, every 3 weeks or so, just to kind of highlight interesting things that are going on in the cryptocurrency space. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to visit our website at CenacleCapital.com, and they can send us a message through the form handler on the website. And always love to talk about cryptocurrency and all things blockchain and distributed, as well as our traditional asset classes in the market. So I thank you for that, Mark.
Check him out, Mr. Bill. You can also give him a follow on the Twitters at Cenacle Capital, CENACLE. Capital, all one word. And of course, you know where to go to check out all these analytics we've been talking about all show long. Genesis Volatility, aka gvol.io, is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. If you want more about crypto analytics and volatility, make sure you tune in to our pro Q&A session tomorrow with Mr. Simon Ho, the creator of BitVol and BitSkew, as well as many other products. He knows a thing or two about Bitcoin and crypto vol. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say on the recent movements, recent sell-off, and all the other madness that's been going on out there of late. He's also a product creator, so all the meltdown with the stable coins will probably be on his mind as well. So if you're intrigued by that stuff, check out the pro Q&A session tomorrow. We have a lot of other great stuff coming at you. It's another hot and heavy week here. You want to learn more, get access to all that stuff, including the pro Q&As, oddities, everything else that we do, the giveaways. theoptionsinsider.com/pro is the place to go. Meanwhile, we have to get on out of here, but we'll be back again next week, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.